Welcome to Now for Someone Completely Interesting. I'm your host, Ben Poulin. My guest has been on my radar for a while, so I was really excited when he approached me at my work at St. Paul Dodge and struck up a conversation about this podcast. I knew Bob was an old radio guy, but I didn't realize how extensive his career was. We may have to have several episodes to get into some of his stories from those years. I also believe his experience in broadcasting is essential to his current role as Executive Director, Regional Economic Development, Northeast Alberta Hub. I hope I'm correct on that. And our chat a few weeks ago was probably way too short, and I'm afraid one visit on this podcast won't be enough. So here's to the first of hopefully at least a few more. Someone completely interesting, Bob Bezpalko. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Ben, and I do appreciate you saying an old radio guy. So that brought a smile to my face, and you were definitely correct when you said radio experience definitely contributed a lot to what I do now in economic development and regional. And not to pick, I'm currently the executive director of the Northeast Alberta Information Hub.
Okay,
which is a regional economic development alliance, one of 9.
Wow.
Across Alberta, and off and on I've been doing it, about 12 years now.
Okay. I do want to get into that, but I think it's important to, I guess, find out how the path went and the transition. So let's go back a little bit. A little bit. Maybe we're going to go back a little bit farther because I think a person's history as to where they get is always key to where they end up. Where did you grow up?
Born and raised in this area.
Okay.
County of Two Hills, a farm boy.
Okay.
And, I'm an older generation than you are. So, it was 1978 that I graduated, going to school in Derwent, village of Derwent, then Murnham. And in 1978, I went off to the big city at the time, Edmonton, that I think was around 800,000 people. And I went into Edmonton. And the reason I went to Edmonton was to get into radio. I love radio. I grew up listening to the mighty 630 Ched, the idols from your West Montgomery, Bob McCord, if people remember those names and that. So, I went to Edmonton, get a few jobs, education, Nate in marketing and stuff like that. But the bug was pretty strong in radio. And I started at 1440 CJOI Wetaskiwin, which was part of the Nornet communications chain that owned 1310 CHLW in St. Paul. So I started there about a year and a half, and I guess I was the point where I went from small market radio to Kissin 103.9 in Edmonton. Did a couple of 3 years there as on air. Did a few shows on music, Canadian country music. And then I went over to, I believe it's now Chuck 92, but it was Edmonton Soft Rock Choice, 92.5 King FM.
Right.
And that was my genre of music that I preferred, soft rock, music director. And I refer to being a music director because when we're choosing music, we used focus groups where we brought in people to get their opinion. And that lends itself to what I do today because in economic development, it's not what Bob wants.
Right.
It's what the audience wants. So, did my time at King for a while, and then the president of Nornet Communications followed my career, and he said, I want to make you an offer. I want you to go out and manage and do the morning show at 1310 CHLW. Forgive me, Ben, I don't know what the years were when that, so I came out to St. Paul, moved the family out here. We lived in St. Paul for a while, and then I transitioned into a regional sales position, and then I moved back to Edmonton, representing Nornet stations across the province. And again, that included St. Paul, Wetaskiwin, Bonnyville, I believe Slave Lake there. And as luck should have it, I went back to 630 Ched.
Mm-hmm.
So, I went back to Ched, and again, there was a major transitioning happening in radio. Moffat Communications was selling radio stations, AM, FM, rules were changing. And then we decided to move back out to here to raise the family because I truly believe the area that we're talking today is the best place to raise a family. However, when I came back, I noticed that the school I went to, school and didn't exist. The village didn't exist. It was incorporated. And that's where economic development, I started working for the town of El Point. I was also working in the oil and gas industry. Again, I knew agriculture, I knew other sectors. And then after about 4 years on a part-time basis with El Point and the oil and gas, the position at Alberta Hub came open, and I applied for it, and they hired me on there. So that was a bit of a whirlwind there. I went. So yeah, that's how it's interesting, how the radio attaches to economic development.
It is, and I always, I think what I enjoyed most about hearing some of your stories when we talked a few weeks back was that I really feel like you had the tail end of what was probably the greatest era of radio before it got.
Oh, you nailed it.
You
nailed it.
The computer technology really spelled the end of the necessity of having, the full complement of staff, and when you had to pull records, even CDs. I mean, as I experienced the very, very end of that when I went to Nate. We were still using that, and then when I was working in Hinton, I was still pulling CDs and using reel-to-reel to cut and splice phone calls and stuff like that. But I felt that was the art of the industry.
Yes.
But you kind of had that as a career, and
my timing. You're exactly right, because when I entered radio, it was reel to reel. I was queuing up records.
Yeah.
And the feel of it, and then the CDs came in, and I probably shared that story with you, because I tell people today, do you know where cut and paste came from on your computer?
Yeah.
And that was a result of when we'd tape those phone calls, because you couldn't go live on air with a phone call.
Right.
So we tape it, and then you looked at the clock. Okay, I got a minute and a half, and you're turning that reel to reel. And I know people, this is a verbal conversation; they can't visually, but where you cut the tape,
yep.
Then you splice it and do it, and you get it out, and then you hit that button. But the mechanics of it was phenomenal. I don't know if I'd enjoy radio today as much on the computer. And then when I was leaving radio, the 40-minute music sweeps, you just hit a button,
yeah,
and stuff. So, and that relates back to the guys that, I was working midnights at Kissin, and it was Wes Montgomery that was the morning show host at the time.
Yeah.
And he was one of my idols. And then Bob McCord, the creativity that these gentlemen, and unfortunately, Bob passed away a year ago. I met a lady at a conference that we shared these stories. So, yeah, I was blessed to work with some very creative. I can't even describe, and just to be around them and to learn. And yeah, it was, you nailed it when you described that. Brings back a lot of memories. Yeah. The album covers, and that was a unique time.
There was a really good story you told me about when you were at Ched. And the guy that did all, if people remember the old days with Rob Christie, Naughty Lins, when they had all those great little featurettes that had like
Captain Eyeliner,
and the San Francisco Pirates, the Monpaw regular show, and all of those. That the way this what was his name again?
Randy Broadhead.
Yeah, how he came up with him.
Oh, yeah, and he'd go into character, and I know the story that you're relating to. I said because I was the music director at King,
right,
and my office was lower level, and just outside was our rec room, or ping pong table, pool table. They treated us well in radio. And again, radio, it wasn't a job, it was a lifestyle, it was a career. Because like I said, we'd go into work, like if I did afternoon drive or morning, you were in there all hours of the night. And Randy would come down, he'd say, Bob, let's go play pool. And like I mentioned, we just didn't play pool for an hour.
Yeah,
like we're talking 6-7 hours of playing pool. And Randy one time just threw down his cue and says, see you later. And you wouldn't see him for 3-4 days. He'd be working in the studio. Now, of course, he probably left to go home to eat and stuff like that. But he would walk out of that studio with 3 produced shows of Captain Eyeliner, and he would voice. And I know Audie Lins, he did a voiceover as well. And the creativity that Audie and Randy and numerous other guys would come up with these ideas, and that's about the creativity. It would just hit you at any moment. no matter where you were. And that's why the radio, it's not just doing your shift for 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
There's so much work that goes on behind the scenes to produce a product. And the mighty 630 Ched, and Randy did write for major DJs across the U.S. and that. So like I say, this happened quite a few years ago, but I remember it like yesterday.
Yeah.
It was that impactful.
It's we got a taste of it when I was going to Nate. We would lock ourselves in the building and just to have fun and play around with stuff like that. But that definitely has been taken out of the industry, and you can hear it.
You're exactly right. Yeah. We were, I was lucky enough that we had leeway, and when I'd come up with a show idea, it fit the format. You had to follow rules,
right?
But we were given a lot more leeway, where now it's very structured. And it's unfortunate that has happened. And again, the way radio has gone with Sirius XM, our local radio station, just the whole industry has changed. And for the lack of a better term, more regimented. It doesn't allow the creativity to show. And as you know, in radio, we survive on listenership and their target audience. And, when you're giving the weather, you didn't say, well, a few clouds today, breeze at 20 Ks. We were targeting a female audience because the females do have the buying power.
Right.
And the advertisers, and, they want to get their message. So you have to relate to their lifestyle. Hey, mom, just remember the kids need rubber boots today.
Yeah.
Or, hey, an extra shot of hairspray or mousse in your hair today. The relatability to your audience is so critical, where now, you're given a script. This is what you stick to. And I mean, I don't want to make it sound too regimented, but it really limited, ideas that people want to be entertained. They want to be informed. And areas like that.
Well, I think it becomes generic too, because now you're asking one person to do the work of six, in the sense that one writer is writing commercials for 6 radio stations. Like, how do you have a relationship with clients like that? And the same thing then just with the announcers. People in Red Deer are voicing for stations in St. Paul.
Yep.
How do you? Well, you can't relate, because you're feeding 6 different markets with 6 very different.
Very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know when I came to St. Paul, we were all individual, but after 2 or 3 years with St. Paul, we were already simulcasting. The tapes would play from midnight till 6 or for whatever. And again, it's just the cost. I'm very interested to see how AI plays a role in radio, because you're saying there's a person in Red Deer talking to an audience in Slave Lake.
Yeah.
Where's the day going to come where that voice you're hearing is not a human voice?
It's not far.
Yeah, and it could be happening right now. It's some pretty freaky stuff going on.
Yeah.
And again, but it's in our business, we see technology, the chat, where I need to write a white paper on this. Well, you just plug it in and it's produced, the artificial intelligence. So yeah, it's unfortunate, because I know I really enjoyed my time at St. Paul, the local information, the stuff that's happening. And giving people that chance. And when we talk about community, I want to know about the bake sale. I want to know about Lemonade Day. I want to know what's happening down the street.
Yeah.
On stuff like that. So, and it was fun, to go out and meet people and talk about them on the air.
I know that this conversation could go on for several episodes,
like you would believe.
and for a lot of reasons why, but I do think it definitely transitions very well into what you're doing now, because it's like you said, how it relates to when you're the music director and you're picking the music, you're not picking it for yourself. Yeah. But also, like you said, you had to come up with creative ideas within the rules of the game, I guess you could say, but that applies to a lot of different things. So actually, tell me a little bit about what exactly it is that you're doing, and what some of the challenges are that you're facing, or even some of the success that you're having with your role as the director.
That's economic development. And again, the definition of economic development, the way I look at it and how I speak to it, is creating wealth in your community.
Right.
Again, going back in time where I grew up in El Point, was a very close community to where we farmed, but even though we were in the Two Hills, I remember El Point having where Zeroni Motors started.
Yep.
A men's clothing store.
Yep.
there was that community service, that area. At the same time, we were an agricultural-based community at the time because we are talking the early 70s. And there was enough population to maintain it. Again, I'm an old guy, so yeah, there were farmers every 2 miles apart.
Yeah.
The school bus stopped every 2 miles apart. So El Point, and, to talk about El Point as an example, they had an elementary school, a high school. There was a critical mass. However, as time went on, the population was dropping. Okay. It happens because it is. Hubs started developing.
Yeah.
Businesses moving to larger centers and cases like that. So when I came back and I mentioned where Derwent doesn't exist, it exists, but not as an incorporated community. Every community, of course, wants young people to move in. We want a strong recreation, education, healthcare. Well, that costs money. And, so to attract businesses, it's not just about the community anymore. It's on a regional basis. So I look after the Alberta Hub region. I'm very proud to say we have 50 members, 35 municipalities, which spread over 10 counties. We have our First Nations involvement, 4 First Nations, 4 Métis settlements. Our colleges are involved, business and industry, because we all need to work together in order to provide jobs, pay taxes, so we can have all these things. It's a change. It's also not what communities are used to. Things happened in the past, happened. I still remember this day when I left this area in 1978. There was no oil.
Yeah.
We farmed secondary highway 640, which some people might know where that is. It was a goat trail.
Yeah.
Well, that was the area that got hit with major oil exploration. And I remember cresting a hill and seeing the drilling rigs and the service rigs. So we were extracting a commodity out of the ground, and we needed businesses. A subdivision in El Point was created because of demand for housing. So it wasn't something economic development had to do.
Right.
I didn't have to phone that CNRL and say, hey, the dinosaurs died here, drill.
Yeah.
They knew that. So how can we leverage that?
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So it's a matter of a regional approach. Across the province right now, people know about Edmonton Global, the metropolitan area working with the counties around. So, facilitating projects and initiating projects that would benefit every member. Mm-hmm. We're a grassroots organization. I talk to all the members, what they would like to see happen, and I bring it all together on a regional basis in areas like that. We work very closely with the government. We're core funded by Jobs, Economy, and Trade, and every member pays either a per capita. So we have skin in the game, but it's the ability to collaborate and work together as a team, because I truly believe my success will come through your success.
Right.
And even though we have our 2 cities, Lloydminster and Cold Lake, they have capacity, they have resources, and I also work with the village of Glendon that doesn't. But the larger communities understand and appreciate that the smaller communities need help. So that in itself is a success.
Right.
It's not competition, because what happens in Lac La Biche will affect Vermilion. What happens in Lloydminster will affect Athabasca, because we're all connected, our highway systems. Mm-hmm. I can live in St. Paul, I'm working in Cold Lake or Fort McMurray. And we've taken that to the extreme where people fly in from BC or UK to work in Alberta. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's a success, and I'm very happy that I work with some great people, elected officials from across the region, that they understand this.
Yeah.
Knowing that the pressure is on for taxation, because we do want that quality of life.
Yeah.
Leveraging projects like the carbon capture, utilization, storage, the Pathways Alliance. There's other projects going on across the region. Well, how can we leverage that to provide more opportunity? Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's changing times in this approach.
What you brought up it just has my wheel spinning now a little bit here, and I guess the analogy is, or the parallels of communities, whether they succeed or not succeed, based on cost of living. So you look at some way, somehow, Elk Point is kind of sustained, is what I would say. They're a survivor for a small town. But you look just south where we talk about Derwent, which I think was a really nice little community. I remember playing hockey. They had minor hockey. They had businesses there. Yeah. And now all of that is shut down. There's a hotel with the best pizza you can possibly imagine. There may be a place in Hinton that gives it a run for its money, but you know what? It's people drive all around. But what is there anything? And it's like how I say, like, small market radio didn't survive because the cost of operating versus how they do it now. And I get that. I still disagree with it, but I still understand that. Is there a way that communities, take Glendon, for example, which to me is hanging on there. There's some good businesses there. But I could see Glendon tipping one way or the other and becoming like a Derwent. Yeah. Is there a way to sustain that or even in the case of a Derwent to revitalize it somehow? Because I think these are great locations that as an area has a lot to offer, and as kind of a sub-community, like where you don't have to live in the big city or the bigger center necessarily.
You ask a lot of great questions in that statement, and you bring up such valuable points because, and again, this goes back to where before we started the podcast. I want to apologize for the answer I'm about to give because I can't answer one thing without attaching a million things to the other one.
Please don't, because there was a lot of directions we could go in with that.
It's true, and again, I was born and raised in rural, farm boy, and I loved the lifestyle. But I made the decision to leave, and I spent 25 years in the big city. You know, if you want to call Edmonton a big city. But you can take the boy out of the country,
yeah,
but you can't. And I'm gonna use philosophical answers. It's just like when I moved to Edmonton, and they says, "Well, Bob, what do you miss the most?" I says two things: how dark it gets at night, and how green it gets in the springtime. But I could stand here all day trying to explain it to you, but until you experience it, you'll have no idea.
Yeah,
it comes down to a lifestyle, and I don't know if you or anybody listening to this podcast, I'm going to bring this up, read the book Hollowing Out the Middle. It's a paperback, quick read about an Ohio town that it talked about where parents tell their kids, you got to get out. There's nothing for you here. They weren't being facetious or whatever, just you got, better way of life. And that goes to our parents and the generation before us that raised us, that wanted our lives to be better.
Right.
But I don't have to leave. But they said good. And we're the same people that'll sit in a coffee shop and say, geez, the young kids aren't staying. Mm-hmm. Now, I bring that up because I have 3 kids. We have 3 kids. I want them to go out to the world to experience.
Right.
At the same time, I want to give them a reason to come back.
Right.
And whether it's in technology or whatever the case may be. And part of my work is talking about broadband in rural Alberta. Because the broadband, it sucks.
Yeah.
Investors will come out and they're interested and they see this infrastructure of broadband, the capability, because I'll go to kids and say, you've played video games all your life?
Yeah.
How would you like to design your own video game? Yeah. But where do they have to go and get that education?
Right.
And then they come back and they can work from home if they have the capacity and the broadband to create this game, because there are engineers working for large companies in rural wherever.
Right.
But if you don't have that basic infrastructure in place to do that, and now in technology, well, telemedicine, telehealth, well, that's great, but guess what? We got no broadband.
Right.
Emergency services and there. So the job skills required today, and I know St. Paul is very blessed to have an individual who's pushing the STEM and the STEAM.
Right.
School boards are jumping on board. That is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Now, I have no idea what the outcome's going to be, but I know it's going to be good.
Right.
And this goes back to an inside joke when I hear, people are very innovative and they're disrupting. That just tells me there's people, they don't know what they're doing, but they're good at it.
Yeah.
And that, that speaks to, is there a chance, like you say, can we revitalize rural Alberta? Yes.
Okay.
However, at the same time, what lifestyle are people looking for?
Right.
I lived in the city for a while, but wasn't comfortable.
Right.
I'm comfortable in rural Alberta, and that. So, yeah, people are looking at our area, lower cost of living area. It's just wrapping people's minds around. Like, I remember in Edmonton, it took me 40 minutes to get to work. Well, I live in El Point. Well, it only takes me 20 minutes to get to work in St. Paul, and I enjoy the view.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's interesting. It is possible, Ben. But we need to do more to promote, talk positively.
Yeah.
Every community has its issues.
I guess in my mind is how would you showcase what it's like to live out here? You'd really have to find to show them how green it is in the spring, I guess, and those little things that, and even if you did a video and stuff like that, it's not the same as actually standing in that spot.
Yeah, and it's very true. And again, with COVID situation, I call it a situation. I don't know what to call it.
Nobody does.
Technology was playing a part, and this is where the use of drone videos came in.
Right.
Where Alberta Hub had a project where, we showcased.
Right.
And I know there's other organizations like, from a tourism perspective, show the lakes and give that perspective of what is out here, to experience. So from, the website, showing reality as much as possible, inviting people out to come and experience, that's what we need to be more proactive on.
Yeah.
And I use this term respectively. We don't brag about ourselves enough in a very respectful way.
Right.
It's very important that, whether it's the village of Glendon, that is a great community to live in, or the city of Cold Lake or Thorhill County, we have something for everybody.
Yeah. And
to me, rural Alberta really lends itself for an education for our kids.
And I'm glad you brought up the one thing, because we were talking, because I was going to mention it simply because I just recently had him on my last podcast, Karam Abbasi, who's running the STEM and STEAM.
Yes.
And what has happened there in a very short amount of time is one of the most impressive things I've seen in this area with what he's doing, with what kids are doing and accomplishing. So we may find ourselves in a situation where we'll see some real diversity in what we can offer educationally to kids in the area and young adults, and what may develop with economics as well.
It blew my mind when I went to the open house, or that event he held, and to see the kids and it was freaky.
Yeah.
That blew my mind.
Yeah.
And kudos to him, the work he did. And again, there's a passionate champion right there, Grim, who, so I have had the pleasure to meet him, and, any support that comes through, whether it's grant or funding or connections, I just send his way. But he's done phenomenal work. And there's other people that have done a lot of other work.
For sure. To do that. And that's one thing he did say, is that his full credit to everybody that has found a way for him. He's just kind of put it out. But it made me think of a comment you had made to me when we had our last conversation there at the dealership, was people say something like, well, it's never been done. Do it. then great, we're on the right track, right? So
I'm one of those guys that I'd sooner beg for forgiveness than ask for permission.
For sure.
And again, it's a challenge when somebody says to me they can't be done, and I go, you just gave me a reason.
There you go.
I might fail 100 times, but I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
It's just, again, trying different things, and it's not a question of right or wrong, good or bad, up or down, and stuff like that. It's just, hey, let's just try something different. And I know the younger generation coming up, I look to them as for a source of inspiration, because I'm an empty nester, and understanding. And again, this goes back to, what I do. I need to make sure I'm informed, because when somebody says, we're trying to attract young families, Bob, what do you suggest? Well, I'm an empty nester. We need to sit down and talk with young families and understand their needs. Yeah. And whether it's seniors or young families, school kids going to university, how can we all work together? And we need to work together. It's Alberta Hub doesn't work in a silo. You know, I reach out to Community Futures. They do an excellent job. Chambers of Commerce, other business organizations. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, right now happening in St. Paul, you know, the LRA that's going on. And I look at the work that those people are doing. You know, the pumpkin fair that goes on in Smoky Lake. You know, the people that keeps that community together.
Yeah.
You know, the Vermilion Ag Fair that just, you know, happened in July. You look across our region to these major events that take place. And again, we should be talking about it like we talk about the Calgary Stampede.
For sure.
I'm not comparing it to the Calgary Stampede, but still with that same enthusiasm and passion.
Yeah.
Because, ladies and gentlemen, it comes down to what do you envision your community is going to look like in the year 2033, 10 years from now?
Yeah.
And what are we doing today that's going to put us closer to where we want to be?
Yeah.
Is it easy? Hell no.
Yeah.
However, at the same time, we need to really look at doing the same things differently.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking too is obviously I grew up, born and raised in Oak Point. I left, grad 98.
20 years after me. Ouch.
I wasn't away as long, but I did find my way back here. And I think if we really think about it, yourself as well is what draws us back, and maybe start talking about that more. It's not about holding people to stay here, but it's like you said, you want people to go out and experience. That's the best way to appreciate what you have and to appreciate what's out there. But also that's what brings back, you know, fresh ideas for the communities as well. But how do we put that mindset that, you know, you should go and experience away from where you are, but also feel, you know, the comfort of coming home and
you bring up a very valid point, because the reason I moved back, because I had a connection, a family connection. Right. I didn't leave Edmonton with the family to a Hinton or to an Okotoks. I had no ancestral connection to that and family support. However, as more and more people pull away or move away, there's less and less of that connection.
Right.
And that's something I'm always keeping in the back of my mind. It's like anything else. You know, there was, for example, say in 1970, there was 100 families that had 4 kids, 400 people, blah, 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 blah. Well, 20 years later, there's only 50 families. There's only 25 families. Yeah. So again, and there's a lot of indicators in your community. You know, I would talk to real estate people they do a phenomenal job of selling our communities, promoting the lifestyle, but then saying who's buying. So you track the enrollment in schools or minor hockey or kindergarten. And you look not only at the current year, but show me a 10-year trend.
Right.
And if the trend is stagnant, even across the board or dropping down, ladies and gentlemen, this is an indicator. I use an example, not to pick on the fine folks of Hannah. However, when that electricity plant was being closed down,
right,
and the town, rightfully so, said, we're going to lose 250 people. I found it interesting because I checked the census data from 2011 to 2016. They lost over 320 people over 5 years. But nobody was concerned. But when one major event is going to hurt a community, so I urge people to check the trends. So when you look at, you know, early childhood to grade 6 and see what the trends over 3 to 5 years, that gives an indication of what is about, you know, to happen. So there's a lot of these indicators that as economic development people, because, you know, Bob has a lot of opinions, but if I don't have the facts to back me up, that is critical of understanding what's going on.
Yeah, especially in that situation too. Yeah. Right? So, I find it. I think what's really enlightening to me about this is that where you're seeing economic development is not strictly a business, open up a shop and business, but creating, I guess, community pride and investment in all the aspects about the community and the extracurricular activities and stuff like that. But like you said, we should be boasting a little bit more about it and what we're doing. There's some really exciting things going on, and it's an eye-opener for me, as a few people I've talked to that are new to the area, new to the country even, are very involved and very excited about being here. And I think that's going to generate a little bit of momentum too. But if we can kind of feed off of that and yeah.
You again, great points, that raise. And again, in our world of, economic development, we have, I call it enabling investment because, we talk about attracting businesses to our region, to our communities. But the same emphasis, if not more, is assisting the existing businesses and our local entrepreneurs. And again, our colleges do a phenomenal job, but not everybody coming out of a college wants to be an employee.
Yeah.
They want to start their own business. So having that support, and we've had people that have invested in our communities already and employing people, paying taxes, supporting all these groups. We have to ensure that we're aware of the barriers they're facing and offering that same assistance and identifying, because we use a term in economic development, clustering. St. Paul, great example here on 881, where you have the St. Paul seed cleaning plant, you have another ag producer, you've got two major implement dealers. You look at the amount of money on that intersection around 881, mother of God. So there's a cluster. So we use that to attract business. The inland terminals that opened up along the CN secondary line through Vermilion, Grains Connect, G3, Richardson's Pioneer. Yeah, it's great. The farmers have an excellent source, but we're shipping a raw commodity away and have to buy it back. So can we use that inland terminal that it's a consolidator that, hey, you don't have to load it on 100 rail cars. We attract that manufacturer here. But then again, it brings up... more questions because Canada doesn't have a manufacturing policy.
Right.
And user-friendly. So this is a discussion from a policy level at the federal, provincial to say, well, okay, did we make it easy for that? And then, of course, you bring in the costs of operating in areas like that. I think Canada, from a federal level again, there's talk about nearshoring. The COVID has shown our fragile supply chains. And there are companies. Mexico has overtaken China as a manufacturing destination. Right. And I get it because the supply chain to the U.S. is not as fragile. Yeah. But again, Ben, that's a conversation that, with somebody, what happens in Saudi Arabia and in China and Russia, unfortunately, it's tragic what's happening over there. It affects the globe. It affects us from the price of what we have to pay for food. And again, there's a real opportunity for local food production. We can cite numerous examples across the region. You have one very, twisted fork, what Deb's doing to promote local food and suppliers from across the region that has caused them to grow. Yeah. That's unbelievable, on a small scale, but it'll grow. And that leads to attracting more people here. Yeah. Yeah, and we talk about feedstock and all that stuff.
Well, there's a lot of residual offshoots about that, right? Producers need to hire more people and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so no,
we do need to, because critical mass like population, our region, the 10 counties that I talk about is about 140,000. Edmonton's 1.5 million. Transportation costs, because if we were in southern Alberta, like my colleague in South Grow, another Rita, they have a population, or where the Lethbridge area is. Yeah. Well, they've got a population of over 300 million people that an investor can sell to the market on a shorter, Right. But we do have advantages here that we need to highlight that, hey, it's worth checking us out.
Right. Is there anywhere people can go visit, website or anything like that, to find out more information about what's going on, or if they can get involved or just learn a little bit more about what we've been talking about?
Yeah, albertahub.com. Okay. Is the website. Again, our members, to find out the different projects and information. If there's somebody looking at wanting to start a business or want to find out more, more about it. Or if there's not what they're looking for on the website, give me a call. Okay. Because again, I need input from everybody to say, hey, Bob, you should have more information on this. This is what's happening. Thank you.
Yes.
So yeah, please visit www.albertahub.com.
Perfect. I'm going to start wrapping it up here. I think we're going to have to bring you back because I think this is a fluid situation that you're in right now. And I also know there's a lot more stories we can talk about with the radio days.
I don't know if you'd have to censor a lot of these stories.
No, there's
radio.
no censorship. That's the best part.
It's live.
We're not on the old fashioned CRTC regulations here. So I want to thank you once again. And I know you've listened to a couple of these, so I hope you have something prepared. But if not, that's okay. The one question I like to ask all my guests: you're here, someone completely interesting. I'm sure you know a lot of interesting people, but if you had to highlight one that you know that you think you'd like to hear on this podcast, who would that be?
Oh man, you're putting me on the spot because I've listened to your podcast and you've had, the people I know,
right?
That. So I'm going to have to decline right now. I'm
Okay.
giving you one. I might be the first, but I will get back to you.
Fair enough.
On that there, because again, it's hard for me to pick someone because we've got I know a few people, but I have to give that some thought.
That's usually the hard part. It's not that you can't think of one. It's just like you can't think of just one.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
All right. My guest once again is Bob Bezpalko. Thank you again so much for joining me here. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give us a like and subscribe through your local podcast provider by searching Poulin Radio. You'll get notifications to never miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media through Facebook and Instagram. Just search out Poulin Radio. My guest once again, completely interesting and talks about one of my favorite eras of radio, Bob Bezpalko. Thank you so much.